Hi. As we continue this conversation around powerful communications, I want to touch on the role of a leader. You, what is your role when it comes to having and supporting and engaging um, powerful conversations, powerful communications, written, verbal, nonverbal, via text, email, phone call, face to face, or even video conferencing, whether it's one on one or it's in a large group. Um, a leader, a true leader, understands the importance of effective and powerful communications in the role that they play. And it's the deciding factor through their communications as to whether someone follows them or not, whether someone respects them, holds them in high regard, believes that they're an individual of high integrity, um, value based, people based, and therefore it's really important to understand where you are in the spectrum because you may not be 100% there in regards to all the aspects of the role of the leader when it comes to communications, and that's perfectly okay. It's a good place to create a baseline or a benchmark for yourself and then decide and determine what you need to do and what you need to focus on and what you need to work and practice as you move forward. All right. So I want to talk through a variety of aspects of the role of a leader. And of course, it really starts with kind of what even do you look for in a leader? And I don't know about you, but for me, it immediately creates an image of someone who's extremely positive, inspirational, motivating. There's someone basically that you would walk through a fire for. So, positivity is a key part. But at the same time, they understand the importance of everyone being heard, being seen, being understood, being engaged, being included, being part of the conversation. So they're very inclusive. And they know how, as a result of both their positivity and inclusivity, they know how to build relationships. They know how to establish a bond between that other individual or a group of individuals. And they know it goes far beyond just the fact that they work for me, or they report to me on a hierarchy, or I'm responsible for them. They really build relationships even at the simplest of level, um, so that that bond, that relationship they create, ensures that that person's going to be responsive to them. That person's going to um, allow them to influence them as to what needs to be done or needs to be done. It allows that connection to walking through a fire for them and doing what needs to get done in order to fulfill everyone's objectives, everyone's goals, including the leaders. They're also one who is focused on performance, but this is also where they lead by example. So if they want a certain level of performance, if they want a certain level of delivery, a certain level of service, a certain level of relationship, a certain level of commitment, then they recognize that they're being looked at to kind of set that example for the other people around them. So they hold how they perform themselves at a very high level, just as they would hold everyone else to that same standard. So they're very focused on performing. And you can even include not only delivering, but over delivering. I'll never forget my father. I'm one of 12 children, and I might have mentioned that. And my father would always tell us, leave people and places better than you found them. And that was a very early leadership tip that he provided to us. At the same time, he demonstrated that. He performed in with that attitude, with that expectation that he was going to leave people and places better than he found them. So they know that they expect a lot from the people around them, but at the same time, it begins with them, and they expect a lot from their own performance. At the same time, in the subject that we're talking about, they ensure that they demonstrate their leadership through their communications, through that inclusivity, through that collaboration, through that very detailed, specific, complete conversation. Even if it's a directive or an announcement or a collaboration, they know the importance of communication verbally, non-verbally, and in writing. So everything from not just the words that they use verbally or written, but also their mannerisms, their behaviors, their attitudes, all that nonverbal communication. They truly understand how important that is, because if you're sitting in a room of people, you can always tell who the leader is of that room. You can always tell. You could walk into a room, not know anyone in that room and their titles and positions or whatever the case might be, and you can always point out eventually, unless there's a lot of leaders, so to speak, in the room, but you can point out who that leader is by just looking for certain behaviors and body language. and trust me when I say, a good amount of time, it's not the most vocal person in the room. It's not the most active person in the room. A good amount of time, it's that individual who's sitting back, who appears that they're not listening, but they are. And then they know when they should speak up, or when they should ask a question, or when they should insert themselves. But leaders, from a communication perspective, recognize that it's not about them verbalizing. It's not about them talking and leading the conversations. Oftentimes they're the ones who sit back and are listening and observing, and then they know when to insert themselves to where it's valuable, because they understand that it's about adding value and contributing, not just making noise. At the same time, excuse me, at the same time, where communications, where leadership is concerned, it's also about consistency. How you show up each and every day certainly demonstrates to the people around you how valuable and how important you put toward your leadership, because you're showing up consistently all the time. Now, everybody has a one-off, everybody has a bad day, but pretty much generally there's consistency in how they show up. And then, of course, leaders, there's meaning behind, and they understand the meaning of their role, as well as of the task or of the work that they're set out to do. They really understand the meaning and the objective and the goal that they're there to deliver on. So at a high level, as far as like qualities and traits of a leader, this whole purpose, they know that there's a purpose for them being in that role, and they deliver on it each and every day. All right. Excuse me. So the question I would have for you to answer for yourself is, are you a leader? Can you say that you bring, that positivity and that consistency and that meaning and that relationship and that communication? Can you, that purpose? And if so, then be proud, what I call honor your riches, recognizing that you're a leader. If not, then that's okay too, because you have a benchmark now, there's a baseline, and you can identify those areas that you want to work on and devote some time and effort and attention to those areas that you want to improve upon. So this isn't a good, bad, or indifferent. This is just simply information that you're gaining about yourself, and then ways for you to be able to move yourself forward. Now, the big factor in how effective a leader is, especially when it comes to communications, is to recognize that we're going to turn this to the fact that we're at work, we have our employees, we have our staff, so forth and so on. And we have to recognize that they're not robots, and neither are you as a leader. Everything that happens outside of the workplace, you're bringing into the workplace. So you're not a robot. And I lived by the idea that I was a robot, and that nothing from my outside life was impacting my work life. And I couldn't have been further from the truth. And so if you can understand that the people that you're engaging with each and every day, whether that's peers, whether it's your employees, whether it's your seniors, whether it's your board of, if you're at a C-level executive position, you have to recognize that they have outside lives that they're also bringing with them. They have beliefs, emotions, feelings, thoughts, words, and actions. And then ultimately all that leads to their results. And they're bringing all of that into the workplace. And so if you really want to understand what you need to be doing or not doing when it comes to communications to ensure that you're able to influence what it is that you need to have done. If you need to have people respond to you, if you need to have those people follow you into a fire when all breaks loose, when you need to have someone agree with a position that you have that they don't necessarily agree with, when you need someone to actually take action on what it is you might delegate or assign. Whatever the situation might be, you have to recognize that the persons you're speaking to, writing or verbally and non-verbally, they have beliefs, emotions, feelings, thoughts, words, and actions that are driving their response. And therefore, if you can get a handle on that, recognizing that these people too are humans, they're not robots, then you can ensure that your communications are far more effective than they might be today. And like I said, I probably spent 20, 25 years in my corporate role thinking that I was a robot, that I couldn't express my emotions, that my emotions shouldn't affect my work or my conversations or my engagements with the people around me. It shouldn't affect whether, I was leading or managing, delegating or dumping, supporting or harassing. I just, no. Those aren't, due to external factors. And absolutely they were, and they will be, as long as you recognize that, or as long as you don't recognize that your beliefs, emotions, feelings, thoughts, and words are driving your actions and therefore the results. And the same will go for your people. So you want to ensure that you're putting things in place like we're going to talk through as a leader to get the result that you're looking for. All right. So put yourself in the shoes of those that you need to be responsive to you. Okay. Employees, peers, bosses, whomever. And recognize that what they're looking for from a leader is someone who is calm under pressure. So when all chaos breaks loose, whether that's significant, major, company-wide, countrywide, worldwide, like we've been through, a leader that people will follow into the fire is going to be calm, cool, and collected under pressure. They're driving force for everyone else losing it. They're the driving force that keeps them all kind of contained and kind of grounded. But they need to see that you are going to be that individual who's calm under that pressure, and that you are, logical, and you are thoughtful and intentional about what needs to happen, in order for all that craziness that they might be dealing with to then be subsided on and put into a more logical, appropriate, and doable manner as you move forward. So calm under pressure. They also want someone who, especially when it comes to communications, is responsible for their actions, for their words, for their thoughts, for their beliefs, for their feelings and emotions. that they don't deflect, that they don't blame, that they don't, necessarily avoid or ignore, that maybe they didn't communicate properly. Maybe they did confuse or frustrated, or maybe they did dump or demand, as opposed to engage and delegate and assign. So they own up to it, and they recognize that, you know what, we're all human. Remember, we all screw up, we all make mistakes, we all leave something out, we all not include somebody, but they take responsibility for what it is that they're doing, and even they have the back of the people that they're expecting are going to follow them into that fire. They have their back. They don't, necessarily, especially in a public forum or something to that effect, they don't go and blame or, denounce someone or some bodies. They own up to the fact that this is my team, and we might have screwed up, or we might have failed to do something, or we might have misstepped, whatever the case might be. And then they take it aside and they ensure that they work one-on-one or with the group to resolve whatever might have come up. But they're responsible, and they take responsibility. They also know their audience. And what I mean by this is, and I'll share a story about Nikki. She was one of my early bosses when I was in my 20s, and I was a buyer, and she was our director. And there was 5 or 6, maybe 7 other female buyers on my team with Nikki. And Nikki just had this way of, we'd be in her office, she'd be behind her desk, we'd all be kind of in a U in front of her, and all very, very different personalities. Some introverted, some very aggressive, some very A personality, some in between. And she had an unbelievable skill and a mastery of being able to work with each one of us individually, and everything about her would change based on what that individual needed, how they needed to be communicated to, how they needed to be managed, how they needed to be led, how they needed to be maybe corrected, whatever the case might be. She had this unbelievable ability to morph into someone who would get that person engaged, have that person know that they're being heard and they're understood, even when in a disagreement. So she would adjust to the person who's more of an introvert, who needs stroking, who needs, accolades to make themselves feel important or valuable. She would, go and all of a sudden be blunt and straightforward and direct to those that, didn't want pampering, didn't need to be, coddled. And just a beautiful way of adjusting to all the people in the room. So knowing your audience means that, you can walk into a room, whether it's a social room, a business room, whether it's a conference room, whether it's a, maybe you have a business dinner, and, you adjust and you recognize that the people in that room are human, and they all come with different emotions, beliefs, feelings, thoughts, and words. And therefore you adjust to how they need to receive information, how they need to be managed, with information or with, your leadership, so forth and so on. So if you can, the next time you're in a team meeting, the next time, whether that's your immediate team or maybe your leadership team, whether it's your company, whatever the case might be, just kind of look around and give each person like an attribute or a title as to what you think that who they are, and how they might need to be communicated to. That would ensure that what you're communicating is heard, understood, influenced, is taken seriously, is followed through on, is responded to, so forth and so on. Know your audience, know who it is that you're trying to influence to do one thing or another. All right. And then pay attention to that body language. Like I said, a leader, especially the quiet leader, the person that's sitting at the table, maybe never saying a word, maybe kind of leaning back versus leaning in. you could still identify them and go, you know what, I bet you that's the leader of this team or this company, just from their body language. Because even if they are leaning back and they're listening, they're really not saying much of anything, you can still kind of recognize that they're paying attention. You can recognize when they're going off and not paying attention. You can recognize when they're kind of taking in or they're gaining something, new or different, and or that they're bored. But if you really can become a kind of not a master, but an expert at reading body language, you can kind of tell if someone's really not interested or someone's kind of disagreeing with you without saying a word. You can tell when someone's very interested or very intrigued by what it is that you have to say, by their body language, so forth and so on. A great skill, communication skill to have as a leader. And then of course, and you would think this would be kind of a no-brainer, but I should probably also have in here, because I don't think I do, transparency, because that's where honesty comes in. It's also transparency. People will say, oh, well, let's keep, some of this information, from the employees. They really don't need to know. We don't need to elevate or escalate or whatever the case might be. And yet at the same time, if, those successful leaders recognize that even in the middle of a storm, it's best to let their people know that we're in the middle of the storm and it doesn't look like it's going to get any better anytime soon. And as a matter of fact, we think it's going to get worse, and it could be, climatic. That's not the word I'm looking for, but you get the picture. So honesty is critical. Now, of course, honesty can go on the way of wane, on the way of, oh, well, let's kind of exaggerate this point, or, of course, true leaders don't do that. Don't do that. Now, you might hear people say, well, we need to spin a story. We need to spin this announcement. That's not necessarily saying anything that's dishonest. It's more so how can we package this differently to be received in a way that we need it to be received without being deceptive. All right. But, true leaders, especially in their communications, they recognize that, people are pretty smart. People are pretty smart. They're going to smell when you're not being honest. They're going to smell when you're not giving them the whole story. So we might as well just give them the whole story and be upfront and so forth and so on. So be honest. The next thing, though, is also being authentic. And I was kind of a case study, or I could have been, on this. Because I will have to say that for a good couple of decades of my career, I wasn't necessarily authentically me. I chose in my early 20s to kind of wear this mask of this person that I thought I needed to be in the workplace. It has nothing to do with I was a woman in a man's world or a woman in a male's industry. Had nothing to do with that. It had more so to do with I needed to mask my insecurities and intimidation, so forth and so on. And therefore, I always wore this kind of shield, this mask, and was never truly authentic to who I really was. Recognizing that I could bring my emotions, I could bring my feelings, my thoughts, my beliefs into the workplace and be heard, be understood, be received. And so if you are finding for yourself or someone else that you think that they're, kind of not necessarily being true to themselves in the workplace, you want to address that. You want to ensure that, yes, I mean, the minute I let down all my guards and I acknowledge certain things about myself, it became more of, well, Bernadette, you're human. You know what? I deal with that too. Oh my gosh, I can so relate. As opposed to, I was thinking that they would be like, well, you're supposed to be this like high powered executive. Like how could you even, let us know that you're feeling intimidated or feeling scared or whatever the case might be. But you know what? People want authenticity. They want you to say, hey, you know what? I'm just as scared as you are, or I'm just unsure, or I'm just as, feeling incapable right now. So be as authentic to who you are as you can be. And that will elevate not only, your level of conversation and communication with other people, but your leadership. And then of course, in your communications, as a leader, you want to speak with authority. There's nothing worse than someone, kind of fumbling over the words or seeming apprehensive or, kind of skirting around a situation, leaving the other people even more scared, more anxious, more stressed, more confused, more frustrated. So you need to, even in the worst situations, even in the most chaotic, even in the happiest and joyous, you need to convey it in an authoritative manner, so then people can feel secure, because that's what they want. They want to know that they are secure, and stable and safe and supported. So going back to, the positivity, the consistency, the meaning, the communication, all of those elements, um, that's what they're looking for from a leader, and especially in your communications. So you want to speak with authority. And let me share that speaking with authority is not raising your voice or yelling or screaming or using words that aren't appropriate, whatever the case might be. Speaking with authority is just speaking with confidence and certainty and clarity and, kind of determination of getting, not getting your point across, but sharing the information that you have to share. And then very similar to kind of knowing your audience is leaders kind of work the room, what I would call work the room. So it could be a conference room and you're around a table, or it could be, sitting across from just one other person, or even on a phone call. But good leaders, when it comes to communications especially, they want the opinions and the thoughts and the ideas and the disagreements from everyone in the room, not just certain people. So going back to our conversation about speaking with authority, or being calm under pressure, there's some people that, like I said, you'll see a leader who just sits back and they're listening very intently, they're taking it all in, and then they're just speaking and engaging when they feel that they can add value or contribute. um, that's what you also want to pay attention to when it comes to work in the room, is you want the ideas and the thoughts and the opinions of everyone in the room. And those people that are quiet, that are sitting back, maybe they are with their hands, crossed in front of them, and they are guarded, or they're all look aggravated or whatever. You want to engage all of them, and you want to engage their thoughts and their ideas and their disagreements and their position, their opinion on things. Because the more you gain from that, not only are you gaining information you haven't considered before, but you're also making sure that they're feeling heard and understood and involved and engaged and included. So you're solving so much of these breaks of why employees are so frustrated, or employees are, leaving companies so quickly or often. You're solving issues of people feeling as if they're misunderstood, or they're not involved, and they're not worth much, because of the fact that you may not be ensuring that you're working the room and engaging them and including them. Inclusivity we talked about. So you want to ensure that you're working the room. Then, a part when it comes to communications, being that not only what you're communicating out, but what you're taking in, what you're being responsible for, taking accountability for. You also, as a leader, need to own it, solve it, and declare it. And what I mean by that is, if there is a situation, good, bad, or indifferent, you want to own it. You want to be like, okay, this is mine, and I need to ensure that I'm doing X, Y, and Z in regards to it. Maybe it's a problem. And okay, so I'm going to take ownership of it. I'm going to take responsibility for it. I'm going to be accountable for it. And I'm going to find the solution, and or find the people that know the solution, because I don't need to know everything. That's why I build a team around me. And yet I own finding that solution, and kind of not declaring victory or anything like that, but more so declaring my ownership and my responsibility and accountability to whatever good, bad, or indifferent is happening around me. So, you can almost envision this individual, male or female, with a flag that they, stick in the ground, almost like if they're landing on the moon or in Mars recently. And they're just, kind of declaring that they're owning, they're being responsible, accountable, they're solving this, they're creating this, they're generating this, and and they own it. So leaders, especially in their communications, ensure that they own it, solve it, and declare it. And then they're always looking for agreement and confirmation. So more often than not, I'm asked to coach someone on how do I kind of raise up a disagreement, raise up concerns, raise up risks, raise up new ideas without it being kind of falling on deaf ears, or without it being challenged, or without it being, just totally ignored from the onset. And a lot of times it's one, the receiving party, if they're closed-minded, and if they're blocking any receiving of a disagreement or an idea, or a risk or an issue being raised up. At the same time, what they're missing out on, and what you want to ensure as a leader, especially in communications, is that you're not just having these conversations, these communications, these decisions, these delegations, excuse me, these assignments, and you're kind of walking away assuming everyone else kind of received it, understood it, agreed to it, and will follow through on it. So when you're left in your office going, why hasn't anybody responded? Why isn't anybody delivering on what I asked them to do? Why isn't it? Could be because your initial communications, or even your ongoing communications, didn't gain buy-in, didn't gain agreement, didn't gain confirmation of understanding, or of that assignment, or that delegation, or that directive, or that timeline, or that responsibility. So as a leader, you want to ensure that you're getting people not even just to nod their heads. And this is very critical when it comes to difficult conversations or conflict conversations, is you want to be able to open up that discussion and have that conversation, and maybe even point out what needs to happen next, or what are those next steps. And you need to ensure that you're gaining agreement or confirmation that, yes, that person understands it. Yes, I understand. Yes, I understand the next steps. These are the next steps. This is what I need to be doing, and vice versa. So a lot of frustration and confusion and stress for individuals comes from not gaining agreement or confirmation on what was just discussed, or agreed upon, and or directed. And the worst thing that you could do is never have had the buy-in of something. And this happens even at a grand scale. People will all of a sudden have this major initiative, and they felt that they went out and they communicated to everyone of what is about to happen for the next 6 months to a year. And then all of a sudden, as they start working into it, and they're a day, a week, a month, a couple months into it, all of a sudden there's rumbles that other teams or other business units or whatever, aren't bought in on it, aren't, showing up, aren't contributing. And it's because the initiator never got the agreement or the confirmation at the onset that everybody was on board, everybody was going to support, everybody was going to move forward with it. So it's critical in all your communications that you're gaining agreement and confirmation. And then this is where the proactive comes in, is anytime you're having communications, especially when it comes to difficult, challenging, involved, like big, large, you want to be proactive. You want to ensure that if there's a heads up you need to give people, give it to them. If there is a time for kind of preparation and organization and complete communication to everybody, then ensure that you're proactively planning that. You're proactively addressing something before something blows up in the face, or oftentimes people are surprised at something that's been announced, or something that an initiative that's being worked, or an assignment that they're given, because they weren't proactively communicated to, and all of a sudden it comes out of left field, or it feels that way. And to some people, it never did. It never came out of left field. They knew, they just didn't proactively communicate it. So if you really want to be an effective leader, then ensure that you're being proactive about what needs to be done when, in order to get everybody on board and everybody communicated to and everybody clear as to what is happening. So be proactive in your communications. And then, of course, be responsive. This goes back to, leaders set an example. They lead by example. And so if you want people to respond to you, you need to be responsive to other people. And, it kind of irks me when I'll have someone say, well, I'm the boss. I don't necessarily need to respond right away, but I expect them to. And I'm like, well, wait a minute. How does that make sense? How can you expect something to be done that you're not even doing? So it certainly goes back to, leading by example. If Be responsive, set expectation of the response. So a colleague of mine, and this was a good 8-9 years ago, and I took on, this trait of hers, this behavior of hers, because I just found it to be so powerful. But she would indicate in her emails, as a automatic response, like if you send her an email, you'd automatically get a response that basically said she only reads email from 9 to 10 in the morning, 1 to 2, and then 4 to 5. And then don't expect a response until 9 o'clock the next morning. And so you immediately knew that, what you can expect from her. And she was very responsive in making sure that she met the expectation of what it is that she, that system, that standard she was setting. So she was definitely leading by example. You sent her something at, 11:05, and if she went to her emails and saw it between 1 and 2, she would respond to it. If you send it to her, at 5:05, you can guarantee that you're not getting a response until the next morning at 9, or somewhere between 9 and 10. So if you want response, you need to be responsive. Okay. And then, of course, when it comes to communications, you always want to coach others. Again, it can even be tied back to you leading by example. So as you're leading by example and you're, being calm under pressure, and you're taking responsibility, and you're learning your audience and working the room and understanding body language, and you're feeling really comfortable and confident that your communications being very effective and very powerful and very results oriented. And yet other people around you, whether it's your, immediate team members, maybe it's your peers, maybe it's somebody from another team, total team, or total business unit. The best thing you can do as a leader is to coach others to improve upon whatever aspect of leadership it is that they're working on. And in this case, we're talking about communication. So as you're gaining, expertise, let alone mastery in any of these aspects, then be sure that you're passing it on and become, the teacher who teaches the student. It's almost your obligation, because leaders are obligated. Leaders are responsible to, again, being positive, improving on performance, developing people, inspiring, igniting, being consistent, so forth and so on. And the best way you can demonstrate and do that, let alone demonstrate it, is by coaching others. Okay. So this is a checklist. You can use those check marks and replace them with, little boxes. So you can kind of assess yourself as far as how do you feel you come to the table each and every day, being, kind of demonstrating these behaviors. And in those areas that you're not able to check off right away, that's perfectly okay. Now you have a baseline and a benchmark of where you can go, and you can, just simply start working on those areas that can definitely be improved upon. Okay. All right. So that is the role of a leader when it comes to communications. So I will see you soon. All right. Bye.